was a hugely dramatic entrance for what has been the hotly anticipated panel of this entire conference. I'm absolutely thrilled to be back here moderating the International Experts panel. And there's a hint of irony around my invite and chairing this particular panel, because I would describe my knowledge of programmatic and digital marketing world as a solid 5 out of 10. That's basically just a little bit higher than my wife's, and she's a nurse. In addition to that, I have to reveal I have a bias that I can't shake about programmatic. So I thought I'd best reveal to you guys today. And I think programmatic hasn't really delivered on its promise. I think it has a bit of a problem with fraud. Measurement is fishy at best. I don't think you should be marking your own homework. Third-party data sources are dodgy. And I believe the entire programmatic value chain is murky at best and possibly utterly fraudulent and illegal at worst. But the good news is that's my only bias, right? And today we have got an incredible group of speakers who are, by the end of this panel, or what they're supposed to be doing is to try to reverse my bias, change my mind that we live in a positive world around programmatic, and there's lots of good things that it does, and lots of good things that it does to the marketing industry. So that's your task for you today, is to change my mind. And I will summarize as I go along about how positive I am in the world of programmatic. Now, with that in mind, with the worst intro to a panel ever, let's meet the speakers. What we're going to do, each speaker will introduce themselves, and they're going to come up with either a good thing or a bad thing or a positive thing that's going to occur in the future around the world of programmatic that they've experienced outside of the German market, hopefully. And Cadi, because you're making eyes at me and narrowing them, you may start with your quip about the industry and, of course, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Cadi Jones. I'm the commercial director for Beeswax across the international region, so everywhere outside of the US. I actually have a bone to pick with your question, I'm afraid.
Already.
I can't imagine anyone sitting here and saying, what has IOs done for the world in the last 6 months? Programmatic is a transaction method. You don't say, what have people done with cash? Or what have people done with credit card payments that are good or bad? It's a mechanic for delivering a media activity. And so I think that there's a real flaw in your question to start with. If you're asking me what has changed in the industry in the last year or so, I think, well, since this conference was last held, 18 months or so ago, and programmatic has really gained more traction. It's now north of 80% of the way that digital media is transacted in Germany. I think the really big change that's happened over a much longer period, if you go back to 2015, Marissa Mayer, who at the time was the CEO of Yahoo, she said the opposite of programmatic is manual, not premium. And I think in Canada, do you guys hibernate?
Yes, we do.
I have a feeling you might have skipped a few years and you might be thinking about programmatic as what it was 10 years ago and not what it is now, where the majority of transactions are made on a guaranteed or private marketplace basis, where a buyer is buying quality media in a very direct way from a publisher, a media owner.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you'll figure this out, audience, throughout the theme of this or throughout the length of this, there are many flaws with me, but my questioning wasn't one of them. I think it's the promise of programmatic to be the ultimate of marketing, combining audiences with data and targeting and all that sort of stuff to do silly things like personalization and all the rest of it. I don't think it's quite lived up to be like the ultimate marketing facility is what I was angling at there. And then all the other issues that you've got with the ad tech ecosystem and with fraud is my premise. And with that, Matt, you can also pillar me in your introduction.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Matt O'Neill. I'm the GM for EMEA for the Media Trust, and I'm one of the companies up here that doesn't actually handle advertising. So I sit a little bit askew of some of the other stakeholders here. But I think I would agree with Cadi on this one. I think that it seems like the actual problem you have is not with programmatic, but the promise of hyper-targeting, targeting any consumer at the right place at the right time, being able to report on your success in doing so. That wasn't the original promise of programmatic. So to say that the original promise of programmatic has not been met, I think is not true. I think the original promise of programmatic was to bring operational scalability to a digital media that was fundamentally lacking when people were faxing orders in 2008 to optimize their network spend. It was incredibly inefficient. So programmatic came around as a way to help bring digital efficiency and digital operations to a digital industry. And I'd say in that way, we've succeeded far more than you could even imagine. But yes, there are problems around transparency. There are problems around fraud. There are problems around counting your homework or how people are actually being targeted. And I think a lot of those questions remain to be answered. And to go, your original question, I think, was what's going to change in the near future? And I think that the huge success of programmatic in digital will continue to expand to television, which we're seeing, to outdoor, which we've been seeing. It took a little bit of a pause over the last couple of years for reasons. But I think we'll continue to see the knowledge and learning of programmatic expand beyond phones and desktop.
It's fair enough. Next along the line.
I'm agreeing with everybody. Sorry, Justin.
That's
apart
all right.
from you.
Yeah.
So I'm Joanna Burton. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at ID5. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here in Germany after a couple of years of not traveling. Absolutely agree with what my fellow panelists have been saying. So programmatic hasn't delivered. There's more to come, but it has delivered better than we had before. Operational efficiency at scale, internationally as well. And then let's remember what we had before. We had sales houses and we had ad networks. And I would say from the get-go, programmatic delivered better than those models for publishers, for advertisers being able to scale their business, reach more targeting, everything that I guess we're going to come on to.
Yeah.
And then when we look at what's been going on over the last year and a half while we've all been hibernating, watching loads of television at home, unable to travel, home yoga, all of those things. The big news in my world, in the world of cookieless advertising and identity, is the cookie apocalypse that didn't happen, or the cookie collapse. I've learned today, I think that's what it's called here. So as we all know, many of the panelists have touched on this today, there are issues around being able to target and frequency cap and measure the performance of consumers when they access a publisher's website via Safari, Firefox, and using the browsers where the cookies are blocked, where the cookies have already collapsed. And Chrome was planning to do the same, and that was going to be like in a month from now, 2 months from now. That didn't happen. That's been delayed. The can has been kicked down the road for a couple of years. It's really just a stay of execution for the advertising industry. And there's like positive and negative sides for that. I think it's positive for anybody who's really depending on third-party cookies, and a lot of businesses still are, because they can continue to operate. They've got a bit of extra time to move their businesses to working with a universal identifier or in another way. But it's negative for consumers. It's negative for the publishers that are ready. It's negative for the advertising tech that's ready. But most of all, it's, third-party cookies have been blocked from many browsers for a reason. They're also deeply unfashionable and they don't work as well as they should. You have to use a matching solution very often to make your third-party cookies match with another third. So we need a new advertising ecosystem, and that's the big topic.
Okay, and which we'll come on to. And Sam, you actually are going to dive straight in to why you're here, why you exist, which is basically because of this report that you and your team put together with ISBA. We've got a couple of slides that one of us has already appeared, which you can see on the screen there. Can you just briefly explain the report that you put together and why you did it?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Tomlinson, partner at PwC, where I set up our marketing and media assurance team. So we're 50 specialists in London and about 400 globally. The work that our team is best known for is a study that we did in the UK, which was published in May 2020, which you can see the front page of there on the screen. We worked with advertiser and publisher trade bodies in the UK, plus 15 major advertisers, the likes of Nestle, PepsiCo, GSK, Unilever. and 12 premium publishers. We gathered 1.3 billion impressions from the buy side, of which about 0.3 billion were served through our study tech vendors to our study publishers, of which, due to data quality issues, we were only able to match 31 million impressions. And from those 31 million impressions, we constructed the waterfall, which we can see on the next slide.
That one.
Effectively, what we uncovered in the data is that roughly half of the advertiser money was reaching the publisher, and then 15% was disappearing into a non-contractual, unattributable, unknown delta. The study received a lot of coverage at the time. We've received 13 industry awards in the 12 months since. Interestingly, my team is pro-programmatic. So I think that the ability to deliver targeted advertising is a really important part of any marketer's armory. We just want to see programmatic being done really well, and too often that's not what we find.
Yeah.
So I think that the promise of programmatic is still there. It just needs to be fully delivered on.
Okay, so I think a lot of people might be aware of this study, so we don't want to go too deep into it. What we're sort of interested in today is to sort of figure out what has the industry done since this study has come out, because obviously it claimed a lot of headlines. And it's worth noting that a few other industry associations in the US and maybe other countries are conducting a similar study. But do you think in smaller markets it's superfluous because the results will be the same? Just quickly on that.
Yeah, so to answer that second question, I'll talk about reactions next. Just to answer the question, is it worth replicating the study? No, I genuinely don't think it is, because the tech, ultimately this was a study about supply chain tech vendors.
Yeah.
Those tech vendors are all global. So any study in any market, with the exceptions of Japan, Russia, and China, where the digital market's very different, any study in any other market will produce a waterfall chart that looks very similar to this. So I don't think it's necessary to repeat.
Yeah.
In terms of the industry reaction, so there's probably sort of three strands to that. First, you've got the reaction in the UK, where there's been an industry task force established, four-way, so it's jointly led by ISBA, the advertiser trade body, IPA, the agency trade body, IAB for tech vendors, and AOP for publishers. So it's an alphabet spaghetti of trade vendors, of industry bodies, trade bodies, supported by individual representatives. Ultimately, that task force is there to unpick the issues with data access and data quality that our study uncovered. It is making progress, but anyone who's been involved in an industry initiative will know that progress inevitably takes time because you're working to consensus. So it'll be at least 12 to 24 months before there's tangible benefits. But once they're there, they can be replicated in other markets.
Okay.
Yeah, I would talking about progress. The first one of these I saw in 2012 or 13. I think 35% was getting to the publisher. Now it's the majority. That's progress.
So I'll come back to that in just a second. It's a fair point. Just to round out the industry reactions, you've got in the US, the ANA is initiating a similar study, again supported by PwC in the US. I firmly believe it will reveal something that's very, very similar to this, but this time it will be believed in America because it will be on an American study. And that then gives them the impetus for change in the US, which is critical. Third is the individual brand reactions.
Yeah.
So you have some brands who have done nothing. Not a good answer. If 15% of my programmatic spend was disappearing, I'd want to do something about it. More interestingly, you have some agencies who've set up fully auditable private marketplaces with some really positive findings. There's one that we've audited. The 51% is up into the 70s.
Right.
That, I think, is real progress from a publisher perspective. And then third, you've got some brands who've taken direct SSP relationships, so effectively taking ownership of more of the supply chain. So Nestle have talked about this quite publicly, for example. In terms of progress, 51% is better than 35%. It will never look like a traditional media supply chain, nor should it. It's never going to be 90%. But I do feel for most premium publishers to survive, they need to, 51% is not enough for them to make a margin to continue to develop content.
I agree. I was being a bit facetious, but I was actually genuinely happy to see 51% on there.
Do you know what? No one has seen this report and went, yeah, I'm happy with that. apart from you. This is a problem maybe with the programmatic industry. But look, along the line here, let's just make this clear. Are we all happy with the results and the findings? That's true, and that's happening in the industry. Anyone wants to challenge Sam?
Do you have any theories what that 15% is?
Yes. So what everybody wanted to hear was that there was a single bad actor smoking gun. That is not the case. That these supply chains are not Machiavellian. They're just messy. We believe the 15% is an aggregation effect. There's data quality issues in there. There's some foreign exchange because programmatic tech operates in US dollars. This was a study in the UK, so you have to translate and retranslate. There might be small percentage points of additional fees being applied but not reported in the data to us. Possibly a small element of reselling, although given this was a premium study, I suspect that was less of an issue. Once you start to aggregate those, each of them could be 1 or 2 or 3%, and you get to 15. It's not a bad actor, I firmly believe that.
I think the thing I found most interesting about it that isn't really clear when you just look at this one chart is the volume of variance in each of these. I'm on the buy side, and obviously our customers, a point of difference is our customers have to do their own supply path optimization. So they're making choices. And so I remember the supply side fees more than actually the DSP fee variance. And I think it was something like between 6% and 25%. And so where you've got an 8% number showing here, that looks really normal. But I think we've seen a lot of brands that we work with being much more interested in taking control of their traffic shaping, of their supply path optimization. Can they find, if they know which publisher they want to buy, can they find an 8% or a 6% route to that supply rather than a 25% route to that supply? And I think that's that's what you don't get from seeing the one flat version of this. So go to the site, download the report, look at it for yourselves. Sorry.
Yeah, how much?
Firmly agreed.
How much tech tax should be taken out of the value chain? Do you think? Where do you think we'll end up?
Before Cadi answers that, because I'm relatively neutral on this, I really don't like the phrase tech tax.
Agreed.
And I don't like the phrase working media either. Like every part of that supply chain is working.
What phrase do you like?
It's supply chain costs. Now, should there be a 15% delta? Definitely not.
Yeah.
But every other part of that supply chain is working. So it's not a tech tax, it's tech services.
Okay, fair enough. But how much should that be?
And but it's not adding value. You don't have to use it. You can go around everyone who's taking a piece out of that. And so you should only be working with partners who you really feel are adding value to your media buying.
Yeah, that's fine. But how much do you think it should be? Like 50%, 30%? And we're talking from what brands pay to what they, let's say, lose in the middle.
I think it's going to really depend on what a brand wants.
Yeah.
If a brand wants to pay a partner on a performance deliverable, then as long as they're hitting that deliverable and they're charging for that deliverable, and that's perhaps an auditable thing they can do, does it matter necessarily what they're charging, as long as the brand is happy for it and the publisher is getting a fair fee at the end, a fair price for their media? There are other folks who really want to know exactly what is going to each part of those, and they should be working with their partners to negotiate the fees that they are happy with based on the value that platform is delivering.
So going along the chain, I guess the issue is sharing the data, right? And I guess one of the issues with this study and with lots of these studies is that the big boys don't want to share data. That's the Google and the Facebooks. Like, do you ever see them wanting to open their books to you, Sam, so you can pick away at what they're doing?
So a couple of thoughts on that. So first, to answer your original question about what should those supply chain costs be, Cadi's absolutely right. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. I think on average, for a sustainable ecosystem for premium publishers, that number should be in the 70s rather than 51. Now, there's going to be lots of exceptions, but if you can get that number above 70...
70 taken out or 30%?
Sorry. At the moment, 51% reaches the publishers.
Yeah.
That number should be above 70. It's going to be very rare it's above 80. But if you can get it into the 70s, that's a marked increase in publisher revenue, which enables them to have a sustainable business model. In terms of who shared data, so this was a study into open web. That can still be private marketplace, but it's open web advertising. So Facebook, for example, would never be part of this study because you know where the supply chain costs go. It all goes to Facebook. Google did share data with us. So both DV360, so Google's DSP, and Ad Manager, Google's SSP, did both share data for the study.
Yeah. Okay. So if brands are not paying much attention to it, should we just move on to a different topic then? Because is everyone a little bit bored of even discussing the transparency issue? I think it's really important. But like you say, if brands aren't paying attention to it and agencies aren't really changing their behavior, then what's the point?
So I am by nature an optimist.
Yeah,
so I will give the optimistic view that those brands that have really leaned into this, thought about it, worked with us, worked with their agencies, they have managed to get that 51% up into the 70s. That is a substantial improvement in the proportion of revenue reaching publishers. So there are promising signs, albeit I'd like to see more.
Okay. So the next cheery subject we've got is fraud. I'm good at all positivity. And I'm going to frame it like this. We're not going to talk about fraud as in why it happens and all the rest of it. Does it happen? We know it does. But I think what the industry doesn't know, and this is a quote from Bob Hoffman, I'm not going to read it all out, but he's basically looking at both sides, where the ad tech industry world's saying, well, it's about 1%. And then the independent guys are saying it's a lot more. So I guess my question to you guys, and Cadi, I'm actually going to start with you because I know you've got a view on this, is which side do we believe? Is it as bad as the independents say, or is it as good as the industry tells us?
I think there's a huge amount of variance depending on what you're buying, from whom, and who you're working with to help you buy. Mm-hmm. It's probably a slightly nuanced answer.
Is it overblown? Do you think it's overblown?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Agreed, yeah. I think it is a real problem, and it's a measurable problem. And I think it affects buyers and affects sellers. I think there's fraud on both sides of the equation. There's definitely fraudulent demand coming through. And there's definitely fraudulent supply activity going through, like false clicks and valid traffic and those types of things. I do tend to think that it's probably in the single-digit percentages, but with an industry our size, that's a huge problem that needs to be addressed. And it's something that I think every stakeholder in the ecosystem needs to take ownership of. It's not just a buyer problem. It's not just a publisher problem, but I think it spans the ecosystem, and everyone needs to take a degree of responsibility around that in order to stamp it out. It's not just going to go away on its own, and it's not just going to go away on its own by having just publishers or just the supply side focus on it.
Yeah. So I'm just going to illustrate the point here, because I had Tag was on the panel, and she gave me this lovely quote saying it's around 1%. I'm not going to read this out to you. And I got an independent fraud monitoring person called Dr. Augustine Fu to actually send me this. And this is what he says. He says it's bloody awful. And that's part of the problem, is that you get two opposing views. And these two different views really illustrate the issue. And I don't know the answer, and I don't think a lot of people here do. And that's the sort of the big issue, I guess, in this industry. My question, though, Jan, you've been quiet, so you're going to get this, is do you think it's right that clients pay for fraud detection when they're buying working media, as Sam puts it?
No, I agree with Matt. Everybody in the supply chain and the demand chain needs to take responsibility and take actions, and we should all collaborate on it to try and get a resolution. Mm-hmm. And having worked on the supply side before, you're constantly addressing this topic with a team dedicated to it, but you need a collective effort, as Matt said.
Okay.
Just to add to that, and the point that Cadi made about it depends what you're buying and how you're buying it. If you're operating in a premium marketplace with carefully curated publishers in a way that's fully transparent and auditable, then your risks around fraud, viewability, brand safety, and spend leakage all go down substantially. Mm-hmm. If you're buying fully open market, spraying money around through multiple DSPs, multiple SSPs, inevitably your risks in all these areas.
Is that what you advise clients when they ask you these questions on this stuff?
If I was a brand, particularly for a brand building campaign, I'd be operating in a private marketplace, well curated.
But not only that, you've got to think about the objectives that you're pushing your agency on. Matt alluded to it, but if you are a marketer who's obsessed by click-through rate, you're pushing your agency, I want the highest click-through rate, 100% you're going to be buying shady inventory, because you will see these insane click-through rates, and across a campaign, it works out. If you're asking the right questions and thinking about what you want from your media spend more effectively, and clicks are not a very good indication of performance of the business. So how do you think about it? It's about choosing the right metrics, working with your partners to understand what those metrics are, and dig into it. You should be accessing log level data from your buy-side platform, from your DSP, and using that to look into, if you're seeing a click-through rate that's off the charts from a particular supply source, it's probably a red flag. This is not rocket science. It's basically Excel.
So the good doctor actually said that exact to me. He sent me a message and he said, this is a question to the panelists. And he said that they won't answer it. And I don't think they will. He says, it's very simple. He said, the first thing a client should do is switch off FAN and GDN. Do you think clients and agencies should stop buying from these networks in order to prevent fraud? Yes or no? Quickly. Sam?
I've already effectively answered this. I think I've said if I was a premium brand running a brand building campaign, I would be operating through a private marketplace.
Yes.
I think it varies, depends on your objectives.
Unbelievable. Go on.
If they're happy with the results, they can keep buying on her.
That is neither a yes or a no.
I think most people in this room come from the from the open internet. I think no one is going to disagree that would like people to spend less through Google and Facebook and more on premium inventory.
I honestly think this is something that the entire industry is on, but I would like to have a slice of that, and I either get paid and I'll shut up about it, or clearly after this panel I'm going to get murdered. Right, so what we're going to do is move on to the next theme, so I don't get murdered, and we'll talk about programmatic moving to television. We have got a brilliant set of speakers actually to talk about TV. And when I mean about TV, I actually mean premium broadcast television. I mean the AVOD services, CTV inventory as well. So the first area is on this. I don't mind who takes this, but what learnings can the television industry take from programmatic, I guess, display to build a new system that works for everybody?
I think we've heard today from some of the other panels about the key learning. So RTL spoke about how it used to be that Axel Springer was the competitor, and now they've realised the competitors are the walled gardens.
Yeah.
So let's not sit back and watch all the revenue go to YouTube or the other players. There's innovations you can make, like AVOD services, like specific AVOD services, like high VOD services, but also fundamentally, we need to make television easy to buy. It's so easy to buy in the walled gardens. It's so enticing for the agencies who have a great meeting with the US ad tech platforms that make it sound super exciting to reach these amazing audiences. What about premium television, but just in an easier to buy way? There's not going to be a million line items on a plan. You just need to make it accessible. Part of that is you need to be able to add data to it, to be able to qualify your audience and provide more intelligence. That means the buy side can know how to find their audiences.
Yeah, Cadi, this is a good question for you. Do you think it's fair that broadcasters don't trust sort of programmatic systems and are a little ad tech shy? Is that a fair position to be in? I think
there is a lot of fear of it, but I think some of that is misguided. I think when you go back, if you go back 10 years, then fair enough. But what you've actually found, to Joanna's point, this is the way that buyers want to access media because of the operational efficiency, because of the ability to measure and effectively just transact more efficiently. If they don't start offering it more readily themselves, they're going to find themselves disintermediated. That's a really hard word to say on stage. And I think that's what they really need to try to avoid. So to figure out how are they going to build their own offerings that are compelling enough to buyers who want to be in these premium environments, but that doesn't end up with them losing control. And they have to move fast on this.
All right, so if you're a broadcaster and you've got a choice of garden to build, would you build a walled garden, a hedged garden, or an open playing field? Just along the line, you get to pick one of the three.
What is a broadcaster walled garden look? What is that?
Well, that would be, I guess, like a Planet V in the UK. They control the tech stack. They control all their inventory. It's about control. They control costs as well. They're not opened up to a ton of different tech providers where they don't know what's going on. It's basically the short of it. So That would be a hedged garden, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I mean, or
is it a walled?
I think
Is
that's
Planet B a
walled.
Oh, it's walled?
Yeah,
Okay.
if it's, I would say so. I would put a hedge where you've got perhaps an alliance or a number of premium publishers coming together, but still as the group controlling their supply. And I think we're going to see a lot more of them. You know, buyers are already used to using multiple platforms, right? You've already mentioned, you know, they've got teams using Facebook, using Amazon, using Google, using other supply sources. I think you're going to end up with a lots of different gardens and hopping between them.
Sam, what kind of garden would you?
So putting this in a UK context, premium publishers broadly have come together with Ozone as a single buying point. I think that's a really positive initiative. I think that for the ideal solution, for broadcasters in the UK would be a Planet V type solution that is jointly owned by UK ITV, Channel 4, Sky.
Yeah.
So it's a hedged garden ultimately.
Yeah.
And I think that solution would be replicable in most, certainly European markets.
Yeah, RTL told me that that's what they're trying to do and trying to create alliance across borders as well. So it's consistent and they control the ad tech.
Because just think how easy it is if you're sitting in New York to run a global campaign across YouTube compared with having to buy in all the different countries, the different measurement systems, the different audience targeting, the different regulations, the different identity solutions.
Yeah.
It's a tough job to compete to get the attention, and nobody's going to do 27 calls.
What about the sort of CTV, OTT, and the new sort of long tail of premium, if you can call it that? Should that be open marketplace?
Yeah, so that's where I think the question gets really interesting around what can TV learn from the last 12, 13 years of web programmatic. And I think if it's done right, you end up in a really exciting place where a lot of the challenges we've faced, cookies and unknown data and fraud, a lot of that goes away when you're on a CTV, OTT environment. I think that the suppliers have a lot more control over what's being delivered. I don't think you have third-party cookie sharing and retargeting. I think a lot of that gets cleaned up. And I think that we've also learned the lesson that it's extremely important to do due diligence on the creative that you are pushing out. Because I can only imagine like some of the low-quality ads we've seen on display web showing up in a TV environment when you're sitting at home with your family and kids watching television. That could be an absolute disaster. So I think that there's going to be more ownership and less fraud and more money coming into the market because of those.
They actually had a guy from BuzzFeed present here, and I've had him in other markets saying that actually on OTT networks, fraud is as rampant as it is in display. Yeah, because you can create apps that play behind the screen that people don't see. So open marketplaces does invite nefarious activity. So that's the question. The issue with premium video is the cost it takes to make it. And if there are bad actors or large tech fees, you can't afford to produce it. And that's your point earlier, isn't it, Sam? That these publishers need the money in order to create high levels of attention and good eyeballs, because that's what the industry is lacking. And that's what the industry needs for brands to grow. And then we all get rich by osmosis.
I mean, even in the US, though, where there's much, much more acceptance of open market in the CTV environments, we see around somewhere between a quarter and a third of the bid requests that we see come through on open marketplace. And so there are still some solutions, but it does tend to be much more the longer tail, the less of the sort of premium supply that is coming through that route. But there are brands who are newer to TV and who are still interested in actually putting their ad on that big screen, even if it is, even if there's more risk that comes with that, because there's a cheaper price point and so on.
So broadcasters say to me, you can just tell me, Alice, along the line, whether this is true or false. And this could be a lack of understanding. I'm not saying this is true or false, but they say that trading programmatically in open environments is a race to the bottom. True or false?
False.
False. Yeah.
False.
False. In everything we're talking about here, it comes down to how much effort are you willing to put in? What is the return? How much effort will you put in for the results you want?
Yeah.
Do you want a fully transparent ecosystem where you probably have to hire a bigger team to really understand it, to buy great technology that will give you the log level data, to really understand your different fraud vendors, your different advertising measurement standards, to be able to reach a global... The harder you work, the better results you'll get. And for many companies, there's a point where you decide this is a workable result.
Yeah, I actually had a major network in the US who operate in a more open fashion programmatically, and they believe this is just something that the traditional TV market believe, but it's not actually to be true. And he actually gets enough demand to offset all the costs involved, and he thinks you should be bringing as much demand to your inventory as possible.
I mean, it's an auction, right? So the more bidding you have, the more bids you have, the more demand liquidity, the better price you get.
Yeah.
And so by being open, perhaps you do drive that, but it depends on the volume of supply you have as well, right? If you're flooding the market with lots of supply, maybe you're not going to see those EPMs. And even at open, you know, publishers are putting in place floors and so on, so they can set the rules.
So it's a bit of education involved.
There is an infinite supply of bad inventory, and there is a very finite supply of premium inventory, and you need to make sure that the two are differentiated. But an auction, the reason people have auctions is to bid prices up.
Yeah.
So an auction, and programmatic obviously also includes programmatic guaranteed, which doesn't have an auction. So it's not automatically a race to the bottom.
Okay, so our sort of final area is actually to talk about cookies and goodbye to third-party data, which is we mentioned in our intro. Joanna, I guess we'll start with you, right? Are you celebrating this? What does this change? Who does this change harm the most?
The end of third-party cookies.
Yeah.
Well, so third-party cookies, as I was saying before, that it was a way that things worked. You mentioned third-party data. It's not just third-party data. It's being able to measure associated to that individual. That's done through third-party cookies right now. It's being able to frequency cap, right? Being able to ensure you're not over-capping, you're not wasting your spend by reaching the same user too many times, the same user in the same household. Being able to optimize your campaigns, being able to do targeting, as you said, to make the advertising relevant. So who's harmed? That was the way we did things. However, that established way of business did leak publisher data into the advertising ecosystem. So publishers are giving away their crown jewels, in my opinion, for no money, or for not the money they should be getting.
Right.
And also it's a risk for consumer data, and also potentially slows down your site, cause all of these match issues. So it's good to move to a new advertising ecosystem. Now, in my opinion, we need to get used to a world where we're sharing much less data, and it's enough that it's sustainable, that publishers can still have sustainable advertising revenues, that advertisers and agencies can still work, can still reach their audiences, but without putting the consumer data or the publisher data at risk.
Yeah. Does this move strengthen sort of the gaffers, if you like, over the independents? Because I'm going to say independents, but smaller publishers, because they got a lot of their data from third-party sources.
Well, also from first-party sources. So, you know, you go to Facebook, you log in, you post all your photos, you share your nice pictures of being in Santa Monica one week and Hamburg the next week, and your glamorous lifestyle. And then that's very easy to then target you with advertising that's relevant.
I've deleted Facebook. I don't have that.
or
and Instagram.
Or Instagram, you know, and it works. And it's easy to buy, as I was talking about before, and you can measure the results that you drive. But how does the open web, how do independent publishers compete with that? How do advertisers, they don't just want to buy in the walled gardens. How can advertisers reach the right target audience and not waste loads of advertising on them, and not send them dog food when they're a cat owner, and, you know, all of that? How do independent publishers and other advertisers have an ecosystem that works? Well, there are solutions, but there's a risk that it's just too easy to buy in a gaffer.
Yeah, and I don't think our advertising industry benefits from having 2 or 3 major places to buy your inventory from. Matt, you get the final word on this topic. This is your area of expertise. demonstrate to the audience why you're an international programmatic expert?
Well, it would be very contrarian because my area of expertise is that there's a huge amount of risk involved in dealing with anything through an open market, and particularly publishers under GDPR, when we talk about third-party data, are exposed to a lot of this because of the reliance historically to use third-party data and cookies as a marker for individuals and interests and the audience that you want. I think where I feel like it's inevitable that third-party data or personal data as defined by GDPR is going to be going away, and we're going to be, when I say we, publishers and sellers are going to be having to find ways to sell with either first-party data or enhanced contextual, right? So I bet Oracle's very happy about their Grapeshot acquisition a few years ago, because if all of a sudden I can super intelligently purchase the audience I want based on very intelligent page and content segmentation in real time, that may go quite a way to addressing the audience I've lost by not accessing that third-party data. And in some ways, it may actually be more relevant. If I can replace real-time bidding based on third-party previous behavior with current real-time analysis of the content of the page I'm on, perhaps that will go a long way, and also get rid of some of the data issues because it's essentially ephemeral and happening in real time. So I'm excited about where some of this can be going, even if the cookie apocalypse, what did you say?
Cookie collapse.
Cookie collapse occurs.
Okay, so I disagree with Matt. I think he's giving up. I think there's a middle ground.
Yeah, I think he's got a vested interest. That's what I was reading between the lines. Something fishy going on there.
Yeah,
I don't sell any inventory.
All got vested interests. But anyway, so I would say there is a middle ground. The thing that we all need to talk about is the value exchange. We need to have a conversation with our consumers. If we're a brand, we might be prepared to offer discounted prices in return for, can we use your data for advertising? Can we collect data? Can we have a loyalty card? It's very popular in other countries to have a loyalty card. And here's the value exchange. If you're a publisher, here's what I'm going to do with your data. You have access to specific content, reduced content, all of those things. But it comes down to having a conversation with the consumers about the value exchange and them being cognizant and making an active decision.
Yeah.
I think this is actually going to be like the most interesting thing over the next year or two in this industry, just to see where it goes, because I think there really are these two trains of thought that we're hearing about on this panel right now. A lot of people are trying to find the right way to express that value exchange with their consumers, and they want to be able to target the people who they say, you use you're a dog owner or you're a cat owner, and in exchange for a coupon, perhaps you're prepared to allow that brand to know those things. But I think we're seeing a lot of people as well who are leaning towards context, and not just the sort of semantic context of the page, but non-user identifiable signals. What device are people using? What browser are they using? Based on if it's a phone, are they sitting up like this or are they lying down like that? And so the different signals you can get that you can use for optimization. Again, if you're working with partners that allow that level of transparency within the log files, and you're working with, and you've got that data science capability, you can actually build a lot of this into your buying and make it not about the user. So it's really it's going to be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, and I think if users
I'm going to cut you off there.
Really?
That's the power I have.
I'm going to say if users don't consent, we should absolutely go down that route that Cadi advocates.
Okay. We should have a panel on this topic. Now, I'm going to cap off with some silliness, because that's the thing I do best. And it's an area called lemons or legends. And we've got various high senior individuals in the industry who have made a quote or who they are, and the panel got to decide whether they're a lemon or a legend. So the first one we've got here is Dr. Augustine Fu. We've talked about him. He comes up with a quote here, and it's all about, it's hard for people once they've been doing this badly to make a U-turn because it's difficult to convince colleagues and clients. So along the line, lemon or legend, do you agree with the quote?
Extra category, skin in the game.
Not much, though, actually. I know the guy. He certainly doesn't. Go on.
I agree with that quote.
Yeah. Legend or lemon?
No comment.
So I think the quote is spot on.
Yeah. But what about him as well? The way he promotes himself and stuff like that. Do you think he pushes himself a bit too much?
Himself.
Yeah, he does. Follow him online. It's a bit aggressive. Next one is Bob Hoffman. He comes out with the quote, and it's that ad tech is dangerous, is ultimately what I'm going to say. He is an ex-agency individual, really outspoken. He is working with governments around the world to change advertising technology combined with social networks, because he thinks the combination of two have brought down democracies. It's very extreme. But this is his quote: legend or lemon? Either one.
Once again, skin in the game, right? He's saying it to be a contrarian because that gets him booked speeches.
Fair enough. Matt?
Yeah, I think Facebook is far worse than ad tech in general. But
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Matt.
I don't always agree with everything he writes, but he writes in a really entertaining way, so he gets a legend from me.
He's definitely a legend. Okay, Byron Sharp for How Brands Grow. He wrote this about a month ago. He said, ROI is a stupid metric. But by the way, How Brands Grow is like the foundation of sort of how marketing works. Most people would agree. Legend or lemon?
Legend.
Legend.
But
Legend.
we need another word for it, right? So have you had the ROI on your trip from Canada?
The ROI for this? Oh, I've made a loss.
You've made a loss.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're always having this conversation with ourselves. This is a basis of negotiation, right? Was it worth the effort that I put in? What's the balance point?
Yeah.
We just need different terminology.
Okay.
Legend, but the quote is lemon.
Yeah, I actually agree. It's a really difficult quote to sell, that, even for Byron.
It's the CMOs who need to hear this, to give the CEO needs to hear it, to give the CMO either care about ROI or care about other metrics.
I've gone over it, but like Fernando was talking about creativity and stuff, and he was saying that one of his big problems is that he has to convince the CFO of the ROI. So we do use it, but maybe we need a different term. So lemon quote, but legend individual.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, last one is a good friend of mine. Actually, there's one more after this. She's talking about viewability. I think attention is going to be a huge area. Can attention be a metric for...
100%. You can build it through a custom algo. Easy.
Brilliant. So she's a legend, I take it. And that's a legendary quote.
I think if you find measuring viewability problematic, measuring attention is going to be even more problematic.
So,
but I'd say legend.
Yeah.
Karen's a complete legend.
She is.
However, how do you say to the CFO, to Fernando's point earlier, we got this attention, or
because she
can
can
I
measure
have
it.
some more money for the attention? Well, then issue really here is around measurement. So how do we talk more effectively as marketers to the CFO about whether it was worth you flying over from Canada, whether we got the attention, whether we got the return, whether we got the click-through? We need a whole new vocabulary around measuring the results.
The audience and the panelists will judge whether it was worth me flying over from Canada.
Yeah,
but
good.
Sam?
So to echo that, a large part of what we do is help marketing establish the right language to convince finance.
Okay.
Because there is an art.
Yeah. Last but not least, legend or lemon. Now, the reason why I've got that up there is because when he launched it, the main question is, I got 1,000 memes like this, and I just thought I like cheese, right? So this appealed to me. You're obviously not going to say Mark Zuckerberg's a lemon, but was he the wrong person to front this launch? Just quick yes, no, because I got to get off stage because I know they're
Wrong person.
Wrong person.
Feta's great.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Feta.
But wrong person to launch it though, because of all the memes and stuff?
Is he currently on a panel talking about us?
Probably. Go on.
No comment.
Oh, man, unbelievable. I just two things. I want to quickly just have a massive thanks and a round of applause to credit for actually the team at this event for pulling this event off. Like, how fantastic is it to have it back and networking and seeing everyone. Neela, Thomas, and the team. Let's give them a huge hand, by the way, for just pulling this event off. And while you're doing that, can you thank my panelists for being good sport and with all the insight that they have delivered to us today? Thank you very much.